Hi, if you're listening to this, you probably belong to CAS 5 class or you just want a review on the methods, on the steps on how to write the research methodology, chapter 3. This is a quick discussion. Let's begin. Chapter 3 is research methodology. That will be the name of the chapter. That's what you're going to indicate in your document. And there are basically 5 things that I will be looking in your research in your chapter 3. And these are the things that you need to make sure are included in your paper. First is, make sure that you mention within chapter 3 the type of research you conducted. You can begin with something like this qualitative research or this quantitative research. PR2 is quantitative. This experimental research, mention what type of research it is. This quantitative research is going to analyze, is going to assess the relationship between variable A and variable B. So that would be the first sentence in your chapter 3 if you can do it. But if you have another style, then so be it. As long as you mention what type of research it is that you're going to conduct. Second is, you're going to outline how you collected and analyzed your data. So your research will have 4 major parts. The first part will be your introduction. That's where you're going to mention everything. The second part is your data collection. The third part is your data analysis, and the fourth part is your conclusion. Number 3 that I'm going to look at in your research is any tools or materials you used in the research. Take note, when we say tools or materials, we're merely referring to the software or the calculator or the program they're going to use to calculate the values or the statistical value that you're interested in. For instance, if you want to calculate the relationship and you're going to use Pearson's, then maybe you can use Excel spreadsheet or SPSS if you're familiar with the tool, or an online Pearson's calculator that's validated, that's proven to be reliable. It's different from the statistical tool. The statistical tool needs to be mentioned under data analysis. Number 4 that you need to include in your research that I will be looking for in your research, also the panel members would probably be looking at them, is how you mitigated or avoided research biases. There's a chance that your research may include some form of bias, or there is a possibility for your research to be dirtied with bias. It's important that you include the section that explains how you reduced the negative effects of your biases or you avoided the research biases. Later on, we're going to talk more about the different types of biases. And lastly, make sure that within your chapter 3, you mention the reason why you chose your method. So basically 5 things: the type of research you conducted, how you collected and analyzed your data, any tools or materials you used in the research, how you mitigated or avoided research biases, and why you chose your method. Now, how do you write the research methodology? First off, let's ask ourselves, why do we need to write the methods section? Why is it important? First is, you'll be able to share your method to other researchers as well. In chapter 2, you were required to review 30 related literature. Nagbara ka mon 30 na related literature. Some of you may even have read more. Now, when you read your research literature well, wala na ka mon po problemahon sa method kasi 30 research related to your field you could have already learned from their methods. You could have simply copied their methods, revised a little bit, and wala ka na tayong problema sa chapter 3, you know. So if you did that, similar to, you know, pareho sa nagkopya ka sa method sa iba, then it would be advantageous as well. It's important as well for you to share your method to other researchers. And you can only share your method via this chapter 3. Number 2, it gives your research legitimacy. It makes your research legit if you outline the very method that you use or you plan to use in your research. Number 3, it situates your research within your field. It puts it to the upper bracket or the lower bracket. If it's conducted well, if the method is sound, then it's expectedly in the upper bracket. High quality, reliable, valid research. If it is not, then it's placed at the bottom of your research. Or situate it within your field because your method is going to decide whether your research is going to the result of your research will be used for generalizing, for concluding to the all or to the many from the result that you got from very few. Okay, so there are only 4 steps for writing the method section. Step 1 is you're going to explain your methodological approach. Explain what your approach is. Okay? This is what my approach is. This is my, the approach, the method that you're going to use so that you answer the questions you asked in your research questions. Number 2, you're going to describe your data collection method. Under your data collection method, you're going to talk about the samples, the sampling method, the questionnaire. These are the things that you're going to talk about later on. We're going to dig deeper on that. And lastly, number 3, you're going to describe your analysis method. How are you going to analyze your data? How are you going to treat your data? Number 4, you're going to justify the method choices you made. You're going to tell the reader why your method is the best method for you to get answers for your questions. Okay? So number 1, you're going to explain your methodological approach. You're going to write in your paper, chapter 3, research methodology. Now, you have an option either to put the word introduction or not. If you don't want to put the word introduction as a subheading, it's okay. If you want to put introduction so that it looks more organized, it's also okay. Okay? In the introduction part, you can introduce the overall approach to your research. How do you approach the introduction? It's either you start with your what. Okay? So ask yourself, what research or problem or question did you investigate? What's your research question? Now, describe, is it describing the characteristic of something? Let's say, is it describing the students of FAMHS? Of course, I don't expect your research to be descriptive because that's very qualitative. That's for PR1, okay? Describing the characteristics of something. Or does it explore an under-researched topic? Hopefully it does. Or establish a causal relationship. Now, if it's exploring an under-researched topic, you can mention that on the first sentence. You can say, this quantitative research aims to explore an under-researched topic entitled, or aims to explore an under-researched topic on the relationship between variable A and variable B. If it's establishing a causal relationship, if it's trying to see whether there's a cause and effect relationship between your variable 1 and variable 2, your independent and your dependent variables, then you can begin with, this quantitative research aims to establish a causal relationship between variable 1 and variable 2. Okay, that's how I expect you to begin your methods. Next, you're going to tell the readers what type of data you need to achieve with this aim. What type of data you need in order for you to achieve this aim. Are you going to use quantitative data, a qualitative data, or a mix of both? Now, in this class, I expect you to only use quantitative data. If you're going to use qualitative data, then you're going to transform it into a numerical form that you can use for some statistical treatment. Second, you're going to mention, are you going to collect the data yourself? Meaning, are you going to use primary data? Or are you going to use secondary data collected by someone else? Now, secondary data is, secondary data. Pag ang data nyo, ginkuha nyo na lang from a third party, from a different source. For instance, the grade of the students. You don't need to grade the students anymore. Hindi mo na kailangan mag-test or mag-klase sa INDA. All you need to do is to go to the teacher, get the grades. The grades, it's an example of a secondary data. Okay? Now, if it's primary data, you tell the readers that, or the panelists, or whoever is going to read your paper, that your data is primary in nature. That you're going to collect data, you're going to use some questionnaire and so on and so forth. If it's secondary data, then you're going to tell them this data will come from the teachers and so on and so forth. Okay? Lastly, experimental data gathered by controlling and manipulating variables, or descriptive data gathered via observations. Now, you need to understand that in experiments, you will need to control and manipulate some variables. Why? Because you want, kailangan kontrolin mo inan mga variables para, halimbawa, ikaw kan set up A kag set up B. Gusto mo maarman kung ano ang epekto sa, halimbawa, mga tanom. Sinina fertilizer X. Okay? Ang imo setup A, waran fertilizer. Ang imo setup B, ugwasan fertilizer. Now, without controlling the variables, you will never know. Basi ang setup A, nagdako siya, minsan why fertilizer, kay mas nainitan siya. Or mas damo siya tubig. Or mas mataba ang tuta na gingamit sa iya. So, in order for you to avoid that, dapat para reusing the sun variables, ang iba lang, ito lang na control. O ito lang na treatment. Ang isad, igwa, ang isad, wara, fertilizer X. So, you're gonna control the amount of sunlight each of the setups will receive. You're gonna control the amount of water each of the setups will receive. The type of soil, ang klase sang tanom. Hindi ba pwede na mabuhay yun ang ginbutang mo sa setup A, ang ginbutang mo sa setup B, mamatay. So, dapat you're gonna control. That's experimental data. And if you're going to test the before and after, halimbawa, gusto mo maaraman may before, may Y intervention, kag go intervention, then you're basically doing some form of experimental data gathering. Make sure that you mention that. Okay? Or you can start with your why. Diba? Pwede naka-start ang imo what, or ma-start ka sa imo why. Either way, you still include the what and the why. Ma-decide ka lang sino ang mauna. Okay? If you decide to start with your why, then here are the questions you need to answer. First is, why is this the best way to answer your research question? Include mo na. 1 paragraph. Justify. Number 2, is this a standard methodology in your field or does it require justification? Pag ang imo method, pareho na sang ginahimo sang iban, pag abot sa pareho na research sa imo, then you don't have to explain. You just mention that this is a method, standard method used for research involving this variable 1 and this variable 2. If it is not standard, pag kakaiba, pag bag-o, pag kangarat-ngarat na ibagid ang imo ginagamit na method, iba man ang ginagamit sila na research na method, then you need to justify. If it requires justification, you allocate 1, 2, or 3 paragraphs. You put subtitle to justify why it is your choice. Next, were there any ethical considerations involved in your choices? Nano ang may mga ethical considerations? Sensitive topics like sex, like premarital sex, like abuse of sexual abuse, rape, anything that's taboo, that's sexual, that's that's biblically um, that's not a norm, biblically speaking, or morally speaking, when it comes to our culture, then it requires some ethical considerations. So kung may research ka man irog sinama, drug addiction, mga drug addicts, you cannot just simply conduct the research on them. Halimbawa, mga extrajudicial killing. So there's ethical considerations. You inform your advisor, pero your advisor would be aware, and the advisor is going to somehow form an ad hoc ethical committee or connect to an ethical board of some sort, and then your research will be lobbied, will be scrutinized, will be evaluated, and then it will be, kung may guasan changes na i-request, you'll just simply have to change, and then it will be approved. So you mentioned that if there's ethical consideration, but I believe most of you, or all of you, have researched without that big of an ethical consideration. Next is, what criteria for validity and reliability in this type of what are the criteria for validity and reliability in this type of research? Now, for validity and reliability, you need to detail. Hain ka man nagkuha sang Indosan tool, diba? Questionnaire needs to be valid. Paano ba maging valid? There's a validity testing para sa questionnaire, and it takes a lot of time. That's why I don't want you to create your own questionnaire anymore. No need for that. All you need to do is look for a questionnaire online. It's already validated. Make sure that you read the documentation. Ang may research ang validity, read it. Make yourself informed. Dapat valid gid ang pag-validity test. And use that. Modify a little bit. Mention the title. Cite the sources, and then use that so that it's valid. Only a validly conducted research will produce a reliable will result in a reliable will produce a reliable result. If it's not, then you cannot use any information you get from your research to conclude. Pag may bias, how did you prevent bias from affecting your data? You allocate as a portion of that in your introduction, a paragraph as well. Now, step 2, describe your data collection method. So, in step 2, a major part of your method major heading is data collection methods. So, under that, you're gonna tell what data collection method did you use. Did you use quantitative method? Kung kailangan mo mag-generalize, of course, you're going to use quantitative method. Did you use survey? If you're going to use survey, here are the things that you need to include in the discussion. This will be under questionnaire, right? Or survey questionnaire, or data collection tool. You can subtitle this section as data collection tool. Describe where, when, and how the survey was conducted. It's going to use survey. Most of you are going to use survey. First paragraph, how did you design the questionnaire? Of course, you're not going to design the questionnaire. You're just going to adapt and modify some a questionnaire already existing on the internet. So you're going to tell them this research is going to make use of a modified, adapted version of, mentionin do ang title, ang pangalan sang tool, from, mention yung surname, i-enclose nyo lang sa parenthesis ang date. Now, what form did your questions take? Now, ang mga questionnaire, most of them are multiple choice or Likert scale or Likert-like scale. Pag 1 to 3, 1 to 3, 4, 1 to 3, 4, 5, mga Likert scale na siya. I think more than 5, it's already called a Likert-like scale. Depende na siya. I-mention man na sa in the source. So, sabihin nito, this research is gonna make use of a Likert scale. Okay? Where your survey is conducted in person or virtually. Sabi nyo din, this research will be conducted in person by enumerators. Or, kung virtual man, this research will make use of a questionnaire adapted from, entitled, and translated into Google Form administered online. Sabi din kung paano na siya i-administer na questionnaire. What sampling method? Igwa na ka mo sang nano ang mga under sa data collection method. Una, ang imo sang data collection tool. Diba? Sabi natin, survey or kung ano man. Or questionnaire. Tapos, i-describe mo dira ang how did you design the questionnaire or how did you adapt, what form did your questions take, where your survey is conducted in person or virtually, or are you planning to conduct your survey in person or virtually. And then, you're gonna dedicate a separate section called sampling and sampling method. So, sabi nito, sample and sampling method. Pirang indosang participants. Diba? Or, unahon nyo anong sampling method. Nano ang sampling method nito? Random sampling, simple random sampling, systematic random sampling, cluster sampling, stratified sampling. If you're not familiar with that, pag indudumduman sa statistics or you haven't gone into that part of the statistics yet, you can see me in person so that I can explain it to you and we can decide better what statistical tool to use for your research. Okay? What sampling method I mean to use for your research. Now, sample size, there is a formula for sample size. You may use Slovin's formula. I'm not going to display the formula here anymore. If you're lucky, you would have seen that in my board anymore. Pero, you can search the internet for the formula. If you're patient, you can list down the formula. The sample size, small letter n, ang terms na, ang pirang imo a-administeran sang imo test is equal to the population size, ang kadako sang population, pira tanan ang tawo sina na imo population, divided by 1 plus n times e squared. Ang e squared or ang margin of error is 0.05 sa into. Okay? So, you can rewind this, write down the formula, or look at the formula online. Learn it. Also, try to explain, allocate a section to explain whether your data is already existing or you're going to gather the data. If you're going to gather the data, then outline how you're going to do it. If it is already existing data, para sa nasabi natin na secondary data, then where did you source the material? Hain sa halin. Pag grades, for instance, the grades, the general weighted average will be based on the grade 7,010 grades of the students, which will be sourced or gathered from their previous advisors. So na, how was the data originally produced? So, masabi kasan, the general weighted average was produced by dividing the sum of the grades the students got from the various subjects into, sabi natin, 7, the number of subjects they had. So na, and the grades are born or produced out of the performances of the students over a span of 4 rating period or 4 rating quarters. So na, what criteria did you use to select the material? Explain nyo naman. Okay? Aring example sang statement sa quantitative methods. Okay? Next, ari ang mga types ng mga bias na pwedeng dumakumit. Okay? So first is we have the information bias, we have the omitted variable bias, the regression to the mean bias, the survivorship bias, the undercoverage bias, and the sampling bias. So, pili lang ka dito sa aton mga pwede istoryan about information bias. You already know. You already have a prior information. Aram mo kung sinoan, kilala mo an makakuha san questionnaire. So, you need to avoid that. Omitted variable bias, aram mo na maiba ang resulta pag-ari ni na variable, tinanggal mo. 'Di ba? Para gusto mo, may ideya ka na kung anong gusto mo na result eh. 'Di ba? Regression to the mean, basically, kasabi na siya na Igusan mga outliers na wala natanggal. Okay, rug lang sina. Survivorship bias, napilian na ang sample, ang nabili na lang imugkin sampling, bawal na. Under coverage bias, halimbawa, grade, masabi ka mo ha, senior high school lang indus ang research. Or masabi ka mo grade 12 lang. Why? Why grade 12 lang? Why did you not choose grade 11? Kung grade 12 lang indukuhaon, para sa anong pag-generalize na? Hindi na ka-generalize sa buong senior high school. Puro lang grade 12 ang imo generalizan. So, under coverage, dapat, if you want to conduct a research, make sure that ang goal is you can test for the small so that you can conclude for the big, for the larger size, for the larger population. Ano na population ang imo gusto tugmahon ang performance or ang result in the future? Kung grade 12 lang imo gintestan, para sa anong tugma mo? Hindi man nakatugma hindi man na pwede katugma sa results sa grade about senior high school kasi senior high school is composed of grade 11 and grade 12. So what prevents you? Maybe you can do that if sufficient naman ang numbers ng grade 12. That would be called a cluster sampling. Pero duwa lang imo clusters, grade 11 grade 12, 50-50 imo selection. I don't think it's a good representation of the entire population, especially that grade 11 will have a different experience. Iba man in the subjects, iba man in the environment, iba man in the teachers. Grade 12 will have different experience. If you want to capture the experiences, then you need to sample more equally. Okay? So these are the different types of sampling bias pa. What are the sampling techniques that are biased? Convenient sampling. Mahatag kasan form, kung sino lang ang nakitaan mo ang mga tunulan. These are bias situations that you need to mitigate or avoid. Okay? So number 3, tapos na ka mo sa data collection method, diri na ka mo sa data analysis method. Ano ang data analysis mo? So, quantitative research ang indo gagamiton, kay PR2 ka mo. Your analysis will be based on numbers. In your method section, you can include how you prepare the data before analyzing. Sir, gina-prepare pa gali ang data? Of course. You need to check for missing data. Diba? Kung sa statistics nindo nag-conduct na ka mo, there will always come at a point in your lives where may mga data na missing. May gintagaan ka mo sa survey form, pero hindi man kompleto ang nansiran. Diba? How do you decide? Do you remove? Well, I suggest you remove that data. Inaantanan niya na answer kasi may kulang man ang i-answer. Diba? How about my outlier? Halimbawa ang mga in the mga answer, halimbawa in the mga average 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85, 83, 82, 81, 80. Diba? Magkaralapit. Tapos bigla may mag 100, 99. Ay mga outlier ito sinda. 100 kabilog ang mga 80, 81, 82, 83, 84, 85. Itong outlier, sad lang. You need to remove them kaya maapektuhan niya ang result, ang overall result. Diba? So, also, under data analysis method, you're going to mention your software. Software, ng SPSS, pero wala man siguro sa may SPSS sa Indo because it's a very expensive tool. Unless may kakilala ka sa Debessamscat who's an instructor or researcher, then makakuha ka. Or Strata or R, or sa Indo case, Excel spreadsheet. Excel. Diba? Or an online calculator. Pero I suggest you only use Excel spreadsheet or Google Sheets. Okay? Next is, which statistical test to use? So, under your data analysis method, mabutang naman ka mo san subheading na statistical tool. Okay? So, statistical tool, amo na masulod ko na ano ang appropriate na tool. Kung may idea ka mo, use the tool na, ibutang na sa method ka, i-check mangyapon ni sir, kag maistoryahan kita kung appropriate na siya na tool. Okay? Minsan may ginatawag kita na two-tailed t-test, one-tailed t-test, may gupasan z-test na two-tailed, one-tailed na z-test, simple linear regression, Pearson's, ANOVA, chi-square, Sheffis. So, If you're in doubt, pwede ka mag-research kung ano an appropriate na tool for you, or you can use an AI na. Describe your research, what variables are involved, how you're going to process the variables. Kay tatagaan na ka mo sa suggestions sa AI kung ano na appropriate na statistical tool. Use it in your research, and maybe we can talk about it when you submit your paper for checking. Last is, you're going to evaluate and justify the methodological choices you made. So, may igwa ka mo sa last part, concluding part, na you're going to justify why is this the best way to answer your question. Diba? But no method is completely perfect, diba? Or faultless. So you go get that limitation or weakness. Make sure that you mention that as well if you recognize limitation or weakness in your approach. You justify your method, you mention the limitation or weakness, but you justify further that the benefits of your method outweigh these limitations or weakness. Okay? So may mga examples din sinina document. I'm going to send this document to you. That's the brief discussion to review. Number 1 is my introduction part. This is where you explain your methodological approach. Number 2 is your data collection method. Adi an imo san sample, sampling, ang imo data collection tool or your questionnaire, and so on and so forth. Next is igwa ka mo san data analysis method. Adi ang software na ito gagamiton, adi man di an ito statistical tool. Make sure that when you mention your statistical tool, you also include the formula. Also, for your sampling method, dito sa data collection methods, your sampling method is Sloven's pag calculate mo sa sample, you're going to use Sloven's. So, include the formula then. Lastly, in your conclusion, you're going to evaluate and justify the methodological choices you made. You're going to mention the limitation and the weakness, but you're going to justify further that the strengths of your method outweigh the limitations and the weaknesses. Okay? So those are the different parts. I don't want to limit you with a format or a template. I want you to be free on what you want to include further, as long as first you make sure that the checklist here is included in your paper, and the second, the 4 major parts are included. Sinda iton imo mga H3. H1 nyo baga ang chapter 3, research methodology. So siya ininaupat amin imo mga H2. Iton mga iba na sulod na sa H2, amin iton imo mga indo mga H3. If you have further questions, you can ask via the GC. But guys, I'm really very busy these days. I may not get back to you immediately. That's why I opted to create this video instead, because it's easier for me to answer all of the questions in this discussion. I at least I expect na answeran ko ang iba niyo na questions, or most of your questions. May not get back to you immediately. Don't get offended by that. Just wait. If you can't wait, you can perform your research. Don't get impatient with the reply. I'm really very busy right now. I have a lot of things to do. I have a lot of engagements, and I feel like I'm burnt out already. I check a lot of papers. I'm like coaching 3. Enough with that already. But thank you for listening. If you have questions, ask them via the GC. In the meantime, good luck with your chapter 3. Make sure you submit on time. Give your best. It's difficult now because you're learning. If it's not difficult for you, then you're no longer learning. Thank you very much for listening. Good luck on your paper. Bye.